Well, hello, bonjour, ciao, howdy, and glasnost. Yes, I've lost my quiff. I had to go, but it's a weight off my shoulders. It is now 45 days and 15 hours to independence. My good friend Tom Steele from the blog Sane Scot, Sainscot, you'll not find many a Sane Scot running about the country the now. Anyway, Tom sent me a piece about that bastion of journalism and wholly backed government propaganda machine, the BBC. But ask yourself this, who actually pays for it? Here's a wee history lesson on the evolution of dear old auntie. Over the years since World War II, here goes. It was in World War II that the government discovered just how powerful the BBC could be in producing propaganda to appease the British population on the truth of what was really happening in the battlefields across the world and what's changed there then. I think we could safely say that this was the point at which the BBC finally and totally crossed the Rubicon and became a mainstream propaganda tool for all subsequent governments, right up to the present day. We are all taught that as we grow up, that the BBC has always been a beacon of impartiality, paid for by the people through their licence fee, and whom we, the people, expect to hold our governments of the day to account on our behalf. In reality, the opposite is true. We've actually ended up paying for our own demise. There are literally hundreds upon hundreds of examples over the years where the biased BBC has promoted the government's agenda and therefore shaped people's perceptions of what is going on around us and indeed in a global context. You try Googling BBC propaganda and you will get a massive response of over 19 million hits. Where the propaganda is most telling in today's context is with the Scottish referendum vote. The bias in propaganda espoused over the last 2 years in favour of waste monsters, fear-mongering, Better Together campaign, Project Fear, is so tangible to the common eye, you could almost touch it. The BBC employs several methods to shape the public perception of any given news story and can range from the very subtle propaganda to direct in-your-face misinformation. Many of the trusted methods they use allow them to claim plausible deniability when confronted by their bias and propagandised reporting, and include some of the following. Saturation coverage. They did this when the Conservative-funded Vote No Borders group began broadcasting, and the BBC had a rolling 3-minute propaganda piece on News 24, making the ridiculous claim that Vote No Borders was a grassroots organisation, paid for by a millionaire down in London. Questionable. Omission. This is where they fail to report a story that is favourable to the Yes campaign, or even detrimental to the No campaign. A classic example of this was when the non-reporting of a massive Yes demonstration right outside their own headquarters in Glasgow took place. Numbers weren't even reported. Smearing. One of the most common tactics employed by the BBC to try and silence or discredit the truth-tellers. Our own First Minister, Alex Salmond, has been a particular favourite target of the BBC programmes where he is likened to any dictator they allow their commentators or guests to espouse without any challenge whatsoever. And I've said it before, spin and slant. The most common and disgraceful piece of spin the BBC employs is to promote the idea that Scotland having oil is somehow a disadvantage to the country, quickly followed by false claims that oil is about to run out at any time. Now, just recently, we've had the report of the largest oil field found anywhere on the planet. Where is it? West coast of Shetland. If you want to Google the Atlantic margin, Scotland's oil and gas, that'll maybe tell you a wee bit there. Then you have subtle propaganda. A classic use of this type of propaganda was when BBC reporter Nick Robinson, him with the diminishing or receding hairline, something like mine, but I had to cut mine off. But he wore a purple tie every time he spoke to or about UKIP during the recent European elections. Another example is the fact that the majority of independent stories reported on the BBC website end with the better together spin on the story. One more example is the BBC reporting cuts to the welfare. Cuts are actually taking money away completely. And the BBC reports it as savings. No, it's no savings. It's cuts. Then you have aggressive and passive questioning. Only a fool could claim not to notice that when the BBC interviews a pro-independent spokesperson, the questioning is always aggressive and their answers are constantly interrupted. Whereas, when it is an anti-independent spokesperson, they are asked passive questions and on almost all occasions are never interrupted or the veracity of their spurious claims challenged. Then there's outright propaganda. This included the almost farcical reporting of the World Trade Center 7 building collapsing in 2001, even though no plane had hit the building, and the building was clearly visible in the background of the reporter. Now, reporting straightforward lies like the London School of Economics study, which they reported an independent Scotland start-up cost would be nearly £2 billion. When in actual fact, the study's author claimed it was a complete misrepresentation of his study by exaggerating the figures to a factor of 10. The BBC never retracted or even corrected the article, a common practice when they are reporting their lies. Then you have staff training. The BBC were caught out when one of their own journalist training sessions on the Scottish referendum debate had establishment talking head and anti-independent supporter Brian Taylor teach fellow journalists how to attack Alex Salmond and the SNP over independence. Now, this referendum is not about Alex Salmond or the SNP or the Labour Party or the Tories. It's not about any political party. It's about you having the opportunity to choose your own government. You'll decide that in 2016. Now, back to the story. So the attack on Alex Salmond and the SNP over independence with no focus whatsoever on the Unionist campaign. Fair? Unfair? You decide. Then you have censorship and vilification. Frankie Boyle, that comedian who is either loved or hated, is a classic example of BBC censoring a person offering an opinion in direct opposition to the propaganda being spewed out by the BBC on behalf of their masters, waste-monger. You will notice that all satirical comedians are removed from the BBC schedule in times of crisis, removal of Scotland would certainly be a crisis, and replaced by safe, passive comedians who do not criticise the establishment. Then there's disinformation. The BBC has been caught out many times over the years of spreading disinformation, including the weapons of mass destructions and the dodgy dossiers involved in promoting illegal war in Iraq, which led to the deaths and still is leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. These are just a few examples of the types of behaviour the BBC gets up to, especially when promoting the Union, to the point where they seem incapable of finding any Scottish sports reporters to host the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. Make no mistake, the BBC is a psychological warfare weapon being used against the people of Scotland at the behest of their wastemonger controllers, and are most definitely no balanced or impartial on the Scottish independence debate. At a recent demo, it'll be two or three anyway, because 4's coming in August, outside the BBC in Glasgow by the Yes campaigners, demanding balanced and fair reporting on the referendum. The BBC reported the number in attendance had been around 400. It was protest number 3. When in actual fact, every demonstrator was numbered at the event and totaled more than 1,200 people. 3 times more than was reported. Well, a final protest for the People's Voice, will be held on Glasgow Green on the 16th of August at 6 p.m. We're looking for a good big turnout there. We're looking for the biggest and best and the loudest. We'll let them know what we're talking about. So, it is time to prevent the BBC from collaborating and stealing Scotland's destiny as an independent nation. Are you ready to stand up against the BBC propaganda? I'll tell you why. Again, we're 45 days and 15 hours away from independence. And now once more, it's no for me, it's no for you. It's for our kids and their kids. They are our future. So for 15 hours on the 18th of September, we the Scottish people will have our destiny in our hands. We will be sovereign. At the end of that 15 hours, will we be free? So there's only one question I can ask you at this time. Are you with me?